Nigerian military has dropped 3 places in the latest global military ranking. The ranking published by Global Firepower placed the Armed Forces of Nigeria at 39th out of a total of 145 countries reviewed for 2024. This marks a decline from its 36th position in 2023 and 35th in 2022. While Nigeria also dropped from 3rd to 4th position among African countries. The 2-year consecutive drop in global rankings comes despite the acquisition of fighter jets and other combat enablers, as well as the military's claimed successes against terrorists in Nigeria over the same period.
Well, joining us now is a former spokesperson for the Nigeria Air Force, retired Air Vice Marshal Olatokunbo Adesanya. Thank you so much for being on the news tonight.
The pleasure is mine.
We appreciate your time. So many things to unpack here, but let's talk about the rankings. The Global Firepower ranking. How serious should we take these rankings? Do they hold any significance in Nigeria's military capability and reputation globally?
I'd like to start by thanking you for inviting me here this evening. To start with, the Global Firepower rankings are estimates, but to a large extent, they also reflect some level of reality. So maybe we could perhaps give you some attention.
So why do you think that we are falling short? Because according to this report, over 60 factors are considered. If I can just reel out some of them: financial standing, logistical capabilities, manpower, geographic locations. What really do you think perhaps Nigeria is missing to make it fall consecutively in years?
Okay, I think it would be better if we looked at the ranking in a more holistic manner.
Great.
Looking at the factors, geography, size, more or less we might not be able to immediately do something about that. But in terms of equipment holding, like you rightly said, there have been reports in recent times of Nigeria's acquisition of several additional equipment. But one mistake that's always made is each time Nigeria makes a decision to acquire, what happens next is reports go online saying Nigeria acquires. Whereas from that moment that decision is made, a normal governmental process will be made until eventually it gets to the stage where funds are released to the original equipment manufacturers. And these equipment are never off the shelf. So the fact that you have seen that Nigeria acquires does not mean Nigeria has already acquired, so it might take up to 2 years in some cases. Now, the rankings by Global Firepower indicate current holding. So we might see that on newspapers, Nigeria has acquired, but in reality, it's yet to reflect. But beyond that, no other nation is static. As Nigeria is acquiring, other nations are equally acquiring. And I can cite some examples, just 2 examples. You will notice that Algeria and Egypt are ahead of Nigeria in the rankings. Coincidentally, the 2 countries are also ahead of Nigeria in terms of defense budget for 2014. And I know that while I was Nigeria's defense attaché to Moscow, sometimes in 2019, I recollect that Egypt at a stage in one deal was procuring 24 Su-35 multi-role aircraft. Algeria was also procuring about 16 Su-30 and 14 MiG-29 aircraft. At this same time, Nigeria was procuring from the same Russia 12 Mi-35M helicopter and was only paying 2 at a time. So we are talking of constraints in terms of funding. And we also know that when we see these fundings being reflected, releases are also different from budgetary allocations.
So beyond these investments in sort of advanced, for example, fighter jets and equipment, there are also some other issues. You have willpower, you have leadership, planning, strategy on how to actually use these equipments, training. All these play a factor in this, doesn't it?
Well, to a large extent they do. But I think in our case, those are not the issues. I believe the armed forces that I served in has very well trained officers, and we also have a strategy of acquiring experience and training from other countries. So,
okay, two things you said that I would like us to really focus on. You mentioned what I may call communication gap. I don't know if that's correct, but as the former spokesperson of the Air Force, when you say that when you see on the pages of newspapers, Nigeria is acquiring, it's not the reality on ground. How do those information get out? Where is the gap? How is it that we say one thing to the media, to publish to the Nigerian people, but in reality, it's a different thing? You also mentioned funding, which is very critical. President Bola Tinubu had only recently, in his inaugural media chat, dismissed calls to probe the military, and he gave his reasons. However, calls persist about the increased budgetary allocation to the Nigerian military not reflecting the outcomes that Nigerians expect. What is wrong?
Okay, I'll start with the first question. It's actually not a case of miscommunication from the service. It's more or less a question of misinterpretation from journalists. When I was the spokesman,
The journalists take the blame? Are
No,
you
no,
blaming
no.
the journalists
No,
for
I'm
that
not blaming the
communication?
journalists.
Okay.
I am simply stating the fact. Really, when I was a spokesman, there was a time I had to organize a workshop specifically for defense correspondents. Because obviously, catchy headlines, they sell more. So it's better and it attracts more clicks, readership, excitement. When you say Nigeria acquires, everybody's excited. But when you say Nigeria plans to acquire, so when are you going to acquire? So I think that's actually the case. In all cases, the reality will be stated, but of course, journalists are always at liberty to choose their headlines. So I think it's something that really must be addressed, and it's not applying to the military alone. On many occasions, I see headlines like, federal government collaborate with so-so. Meanwhile, it's not yet happening. It's at the meeting stage. So there's a difference between intention and execution. And I think it's important that it be properly communicated. Then on the allocation to the military, I know that the current administration has actually really increased allocation to the military. That I've noticed. And believe me, it's a good step in the right direction, but it's not sufficient. I am an aircraft maintenance engineer trained on the Alpha Jet fighter aircraft. I was in Liberia. I can tell you that the Alpha Jet aircraft, for example, utilizes about 2,520 liters of Jet A1. So that's over 1,000 naira per liter. So I've done some calculation. If we assume that we have only 6 sorties, that's the Alpha Jet is just flying 6 times in one day. So in a year, the Alpha Jet for fueling alone will be expending over 25 billion naira. That's one aircraft type. The rockets that it carries, each rocket will cost on the average $3,500. It carries 24 at a go, if not 36 rather. So imagine what that one means. We have bombs that cost upwards of $120,000. So what I'm trying to say is, when we see 4-point-something trillion naira, it appears huge, but really it isn't. I mentioned the cases by Algeria and Egypt earlier. In each of those cases, it was a $2 billion deal. So way forward, I think it's important to actually separate the budget for the military from budget for acquisition of equipment. Because when you see the defense allocation, it also includes recurrent expenditure and many other things. And I will say from the Global Peace Index, we were at about 157 out of 162 countries in 2015. Today, we are about 146, 147. A minimal increase. It could be better.
We appreciate the explanation you've given. And, well, I mean, we do always must thank the brave men and women that secure our country, the armed forces in general. But are you saying that these monies budgeted, and you have also explained that it's one thing to budget and it's another thing to actually release funds, but are you saying that this incremental budgeting we've seen for the Nigerian military has been judiciously spent. Is that what you're saying? Concerns about misappropriation, corruption, should we dismiss such calls? Are those calls not responsible for the rankings we're seeing today by the global firepower?
I've already explained the way the ranking is. The fact that we have dropped the ranking does not mean that we have actually dropped. You know, look at it this way. Nigeria spends, say, $10 million to buy 3 aircraft. Mm-hmm. Egypt spends 100 million to acquire, say, 30. So we have acquired 3. They have acquired.
We understand that. We're not
so
acquiring enough.
So the implication, we are not acquiring enough. Yes. And the ranking is based, among other things, on your current
the question
holding.
really is that, is it possible that some of the monies we're putting down for these purchases are not used to purchase this equipment? Is there any possibility of that? That's what we're trying to clear up here.
Well, we have the EFCC, we have the ICPC, and many other similar bodies. They have a responsibility. And just like every other sector of the Nigerian system, it's not impossible for anything to happen. So, and it is not until you see, or it is alleged, or it is proven that it has taken place, that we can assume. And I think I rather prefer to speak or look at things from the positive perspective without completely dismissing the possibility.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have to thank you so much for being on the news tonight. We really appreciate your time. Former spokesperson of the Nigerian Air Force, retired Air Vice Marshal Olatokunbo Adesanya. Thank you so much.